Sudan is facing a humanitarian catastrophe with heavy fighting that broke out in the capital, Khartoum, in April 2023 and quickly extended throughout the country. A year later, the conflict continues to threaten health and well being of Sudan's 24 million children, pushing already vulnerable families deeper into hardship. The time is 8:36, and we'll be chatting a bit on this about that conflict in Sudan and just how much the children of Sudan are suffering because of it. We'll be speaking to Amnesty International Sudan researcher Abdullahi Hassan. Abdullahi, welcome to Salam Media, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
I think the first thing that we can do is just paint a picture for us, paint a mental picture for us, the people that don't know what's currently happening in Sudan and just how catastrophic the situation has become.
In Sudan, we have had a devastating conflict for the past 1 year that started in April last year. This conflict is between the Sudan Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The conflict has caused immense human rights suffering, immense suffering to civilians, and has caused at least three crises. One is human rights crisis, displacement crisis, and humanitarian crisis. With regards to the human rights crisis that this conflict has caused, at Amnesty International, we were able to document indiscriminate and deliberate attacks that caused massive civilian casualties. For example, more than 15,000 people have been already killed in Sudan since the conflict erupted last year. In Darfur, particularly in West Darfur, the RSF and allied militias have carried out ethnically motivated attacks that killed and displaced many civilians. Women and girls in Darfur, and particularly in West Darfur, have been subjected to conflict-related sexual violence, including rape by members of the warring parties, but particularly by the Rapid Support Forces. The conflict, has also caused a massive civilian displacement. For example, over 9 million people have been displaced from their homes. About 2 million of these people have fled outside Sudan to neighboring countries, while the rest are inside in the internally displaced camps inside Sudan, making Sudan the largest displacement crisis in the world.
And I want us to focus a bit on the children because it seems like they're bearing the brunt the most of this civil war. How have children been affected by this? I mean, I'm reading here that Sudan is grappling the most extensive crisis of child displacement globally. I'm sure you've done the numbers, probably even worked with these children. How have the children of Sudan being affected by this?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, children are particularly affected. As I told you, the humanitarian crisis is as a result of the larger conflict in the country, and we have been seeing this catastrophic humanitarian situation that unfolded in the country. Humanitarian organizations are now warning that the war is pushing the country into famine, and hundreds of Sudanese people might die actually in the coming months because of hunger. In relation to children, according to the latest data we have, more than 2.9 million, that is a very big number, that's close to 3 million children in Sudan are acutely malnourished. An additional around 800,000 children under the age of 5 are suffering from severe acute malnutrition. And as a result of this, we are seeing humanitarian organizations warning that hundreds of thousands of Sudanese people, including many children, could die as a result of hunger, in the coming months. Sudan is now officially the worst humanitarian crisis in recent memory, leading to 13% of the global internally displaced persons load. For example, the data we have shows 1 in every 8 internally displaced person worldwide comes from Sudan.
Very, very devastating numbers there, and I'm pretty sure this has had, an impact on the East African community. How have neighboring countries received these displaced people? Are they warmly received, or is it a situation where you have xenophobic incidences, or they are not properly welcomed from the neighboring countries? Abdullahi. Okay, we seem to have lost Abdullahi there. Yeah, I think it's internet connection issues is coming to us from Nairobi. So yeah, I think we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, probably we'll have him back just to give us insight a bit on how neighboring countries, Sudan's neighboring countries, have reacted to this. Because just like any other conflict, it's not just the country that's we have Abdullahi back. Abdullahi, I'm not sure if you got my question before we lost you there for a moment about the East African countries and they are response to this the East African community, the neighboring countries, how are they accepting the people of Sudan that you mentioned that have been extensively displaced.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. I had some power issues, but
Mhm.
generally, the Sudanese refugees have crossed borders into neighboring countries. For example, I have been into Eastern Chad, where hundreds of Sudanese refugees fled to, and the situation there was really dire. Although the Chadian authorities have tried to welcome the Sudanese refugees, but then most of these countries, including Central African Republic, Chad, Ethiopia, South Sudan, where these refugees have fled to, have had conflicts themselves. They are poor countries. They have been struggling themselves, and that is why we were calling for international support for refugees who are fleeing the conflict who are in neighboring countries. In Egypt, we have seen the Egyptian authorities putting a number of restrictions on, refugees who are trying to cross, Sudanese refugees who are trying to cross the border into Egypt. And we have recently documented as Amnesty International cases where the Egyptian authorities have actually arbitrarily arrested and forcefully returned some Sudanese back into Sudan. And that research will be published soon, and we are happy to discuss with you that when it is ready. But generally, most of the countries have been welcoming Sudanese refugees. The issue is these countries are countries that are struggling with their own problems, and they don't have the capacity themselves to support and cater for all the influx of Sudanese refugees into these countries. And that is why it is really important, really, really important for the international community to take concrete actions to support and increase humanitarian funding for all these countries to make sure those Sudanese refugees who are coming into these countries as refugees are received and are provided with enough support, including shelter, food, and other basic necessities.
You are, the Sudan researcher for Amnesty International. I'm sure at some point you've had interactions with these displaced children. If you can just, share with us, their statehood. I'm sure there's a, trauma that's unimaginable that you've seen from young children that had to endure seeing a civil war unfold in front of them. Or what's it like? What are they saying? What are they telling you?
Yeah, in Eastern Chad, for example, we were able to meet with many Sudanese families who fled the conflict in Darfur, including many children. Those children are really in a dire situation. If you look at their bodies, they look malnourished. They have not eaten for many days. They have not even had water to drink for many days. And they really look weak and vulnerable. And you could see the challenges they have faced when crossing the borders. This is coupled with lack of food, with the struggles the families go through when they are moving from one place to another, because these routes are not also safe. For example, in Eastern Chad, I have met with a number of children who had bullet wounds in their bodies as a result of, as a result of attacks that, the attacks that they have gone through while fighting
All right, we seem to have lost Abdullahi again. I'm not sure what's the problem, but I think he's painted a picture for us. I'm sure he. Okay, we still are we going to get him back? All right, we are not going to be getting him back. I think this way we're going to leave it with him having technical problems there, but painting a very, 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 very ugly picture for us there. Children being found with bullet wounds, children that are malnourished, and this becoming, the most extensive crisis of child displacement globally happening in Sudan. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be coming back home in Cape Town. I'll be speaking to Anika Timo, one of the organizers of the Cape Town Palestine Freedom Motorcade, a motorcade that will be taking place on Sunday, the 5th of May. If you're out in Cape Town, I'm pretty sure you'd want to be a part of that. Oh, Abdullah, you're back. Yes. Before we lost you, there you were just talking about the state of children. You mentioned that some of them, were found with bullet wounds, and it was a really, really, devastating, situation there.
Yeah. These children really are going through a lot of challenges. As I said, there were many children who had bullet wounds as a result of indiscriminate and targeted attacks in Darfur and other parts of the country. These warring parties have not been, distinguishing between civilians and combatants, and they have been violating international humanitarian law, which is why we said most of the attacks have amounted to war crimes. And these children really looked, to have suffered a lot of violations. In addition to that, there is a whole campaign by both parties to the conflict, that is the SAF and the RSF, to recruit children, and particularly the RSF and allied militias have been recruiting children into their armies. And now we are having a whole generation of children who are joining this conflict in Sudan, who will have, who will grow up as soldiers in violation of, international law. And we call on all parties to the conflict, including the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, to end recruiting children and ensuring humanitarian access to all those who need, including these poor children.
And just lastly, you did mention that there's a very, very, need, for the international community to, in whatever way that they can, try and contribute, to the displaced people of Sudan. What avenues are there? If someone, is listening, watching from home, and they feel like the story has touched them very, very deeply, how can they get involved?
Yeah, there are a number of Sudanese organized groups, including the emergency room services that is provided by Sudan volunteers. I think one way ordinary people can participate is to reach out to these communities, the emergency room responders, and provide them with funds. And these funds can easily feed people in across Sudan. In Khartoum, there are soup kitchens, there are food kitchens that these volunteers have organized. At the international level, the UN humanitarian and other humanitarian agencies are also providing life-saving support, including, shelter and, distribution of food to all the displaced people in Sudan, both in Darfur and in other parts of Sudan. And the international community can channel funds to this, and that is why we are saying these funds need to be increased. Just now, only 5%, the humanitarian appeal, the UN humanitarian appeal for Sudan is only 5% funded. That means about 95% of the funding is missing. So the international community needs to, shorten that gap and increase that funding. Ordinary people, whether they are Africans who are willing to show solidarity for the Sudanese people, or others, for the other people in the world, can also support both the international community's efforts or channel their own support to this emergency room responders who will, provide support to the people who really need it.
I think we're going to leave it there, Abdullahi. I think you gave us much needed insight on what's currently happening in Sudan. Very, very catastrophic, picture, that you painted there. But I think we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That was Amnesty International Sudan researcher Abdullahi Hassan, just giving us insight on Sudan and that civil war that has broken out, which has led to Sudan grappling with the most extensive crisis of child displacement globally. Very, very, devastating images that he painted for us there. And I think, as time goes on, there needs to be a bit more focus on places like Sudan. And, they need to be given, as much attention as we give to the Palestinian people, because these are people that are, also grappling with, devastating catastrophes. I mean, a civil war that is now displaced, millions and millions of children. It's something that the world needs to give a bit more attention of, and especially for us here in South Africa, because this is happening right at our backyard. It's our continent, and I feel like before we deal with other issues happening globally, we must give as much attention to things that are happening here in Africa. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll speak to Anika Timo, one of the organizers of the Palestine Freedom Motorcade, which will be taking place on Sunday, the 5th of May. She'll be giving us details about how you can get involved and the state of Palestine activism in Cape Town, and just why, it is, been heads and shoulders above other places around the world, not just here in South Africa. And she'll be chatting to us on that and more after the break.